Boys, a treat came in the mail today. Swag Offroad, made in America, and here it is. I went for the deluxe model, and what that gets you is a powder coated top, zinc plated legs, that foot switch, and this miter gauge. I really wanted a big, nice, proper metal cutting bandsaw. Here's the deal. It's honestly more than I need. This would cut a 4-inch by 4-inch piece pretty easy, and that's bigger than I'm cutting or may ever cut. If I needed a big table, like for scrolling out a knife or something like that, it'd be pretty easy to just add a large piece of plate to this. As far as mitering goes, this is a very nice miter gauge. This is the one that they sell. It's made by Incra. It's also made in the USA. It's their V27 model. It's got these little Delrin deals here are basically spacers. You tighten this screw and it stretches out the little deal and fills in the gap, prevent any lateral movement of the miter gauge. I didn't take the time to put it together on screen because all it took was a pile of Allen wrenches and a puddle of patience. So there's a thumb screw here at the bottom. That one thumb screw goes through this hole here, and that's what holds your portaband on. The plate here replaces your guide, what goes right here next to the blade. That right there. This plate, the replacement from Swag Offroad, does the same thing. You can use it as a guide. In fact, it's much larger, makes for a nicer guide. Now, one thing that concerns me is there's a lot to get right here. So the face on the bandsaw that this plate screws onto, that has to be square. These two holes for the guide, they have to be square. That whole assembly has to be square to the table. The miter gauge groove here has to be square to all of that. So it's a lot of stuff to get square. This is made by a company besides Swag Offroad. This is made by somebody besides Swag Offroad. And then you've got their piece. So there's a lot of parts to get right here. I haven't made a cut with it yet, so I don't know if it cuts square. I've got us a piece of 2-inch square tubing. We'll see how it works. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about this thing. It's obviously plasma, CNC plasma cut, and it came together real nice. Everything bolted right up. I do worry that these two screws are the only thing holding this whole bandsaw on this system. So I will probably not just leave it set up where the whole weight of that bandsaw is resting on those two screws. I'll probably take it apart. That's one thing that worries me. Another thing, I paid extra for the powder coating, and that's the corner. As far as extra cost, here's the invoice, and you can see there that the table was $129. The Incra miter gauge and the foot pedal was $90, and the powder coating and zinc plating was $20. Well, that looks like a $20 paint job to me because it's already tore up. Came to me like that, that's kind of discouraging, but the zinc plating is nice, and a little spray paint will fix that. Now, $90 may sound like a lot for a miter gauge and a foot switch. The miter gauge goes for, if I remember correctly, $66 for this miter gauge on Amazon. So they're not charging through the nose for it. Let me show you a little more about it. So it's got the little spacers, what I told you about. The gauge here is adjustable. You can also adjust, I'm not even sure how or why that adjustment's there. I guess you could put a bigger fence on it if you wanted, like a big piece of metal across here, because you've got the holes for it here and here. The gauge is easy to read, it's easy to operate. It's got this plastic backing for it to slide more smoothly. It's nice. So that's cool. This is the foot switch. It is labeled swag, and it's a very basic, nothing to it switch. You plug in your bandsaw here and you plug this into the wall. So that's nice. The foot pedal's nice. The paint job's not so nice. Another thing, this thing being CNC plasma cut, when you get these little Delrin spacers in the miter gauge just right to where you slide but you have little or no lateral movement, those Delrin dilios will catch on these corners where this thing's been cut and broke, cut and bent, or cut and broke, whatever, you know, bent with a break. It's not really a big deal because of the spacing of these and the size of the table. In other words, by the time you're involving this one, you're coming off the table on the back side, so that's probably bigger than most of your work's gonna be. And then by the time this one's catching, see that? By the time it's catching, you are actually already at the blade or just past it. So you've probably already finished your work. So it sort of acts like a stop. So I don't know if I'd call that good or bad. It's a potential problem. So let's make a cut. Okay, so we're all set up here to cut. As I mentioned previously, there's a lot to go wrong here with these holes not potentially being perfectly positioned on the bandsaw, the face of the bandsaw potentially not being square, and then multiple manufacturers. There's a lot of opportunity for it to not cut square. I think it's going to be good, and the reason I think it's going to be good is because of how the saw fits into the plate cut by Swag Offroad. That blade rides just about perfectly in the middle of this slit for the blade to travel in. So let's make a cut and we'll see how square we are.
Okay.
Let's see how square our cut came out. Got some space. Got some space. So not supremely square of a cut. So in 5 inches, we're out of square, I'd say 1/8 of an inch. So that's 5/16 and a foot it's gonna be out. And you can look at it. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but you can look at the piece and tell that it's not square. Yeah. So this is the way the cut ran, and it's canted like such. So the problem is that the table and the bandsaw aren't square together. In other words, the blade on the bandsaw is tilted toward the miter gauge. So to make a square cut, okay, we're gonna cut it again. I've got a shim under it now. Let's see what we get. So there's the blade there, right in front of the square. And you see how at the top it's out, what looks like 1/8 of an inch and 5 inches, much like the part. So I feel like if you're cutting 1-inch square tubing, you'll never appreciate that degree of out of square. But if you're cutting 2-inch square, wanting to have some square cuts to weld, you're going to be working against yourself. And that's annoying. I wonder if there's a fix for that. I'm not surprised by this because, again, the machining on where these screws go isn't critical. All that surface plate's meant to support is this stamped metal dealio. Those screws don't have to be anywhere near in the right spot. You know, I mean, this thing here, I mean, you could drill and tap those screws by hand and machine that part with a file, and this would ride just like it needs to. So I'm not at all surprised that it's not a perfect square operation. So let's see what we can do in here to fix this. Okay, so let's see. Off a square, the blade was kicked out this way, so we need to create a high side here. Y'all hear those coyotes? They're like right in the back of the house. It's kind of creepy. So we need to file this side here a little bit, and that would be a bad idea. We need to file this side a little bit, and that would create a low side here, kicking it back that way. Let's see what that does. A little more. All right, let's see what that did, if anything at all. Actually did a lot. I'd show you, but it ain't perfect yet, so we're gonna bump it again. We're making progress, so we might as well get it right. Okay, so this is the square just resting on the surface, and I'm just gonna move it in. That's pretty good, guys. Okay, let's make this cut. Yeah, that's gonna look good. I guess let's put the square next to it and see what we actually get. What do you think, boys? And this is there's no burr there. So we're at 4.5 inches. This is the way it would be out of square. All right, so at 4.5 inches, we are that much out of square. That's about a 64th out in 4.5 inches. That is plenty square enough for me. I can fill in any gaps that creates with weld. So a little bit of a modification. I didn't know this video would have a modification, and I thought I was going to make a 6-minute video where I showed you something cool I bought. It comes with a sticker. And I can tell you that the modification wasn't that hard to do. Obviously, you saw it took a file and the tools it takes to put the thing together and a decent square. And let me just tell you, if you're buying a square, see that right there? Buy these guys. They still make stuff here. Thanks for watching.